just tell you a little story about how we met and maybe how he sort of changed my relationship. And um, long before we ever met, I had a therapist tell me that I needed to learn to meditate, right? And so she can give me a lot of instruction, and so I read a couple of books, and I was following transcendental meditation as part of my process, but I would say that that process was frustrating for me, and trying to control an undisciplined mind was very hard. Kelvin comes into our lives, and he taught my wife and I how to meditate, a much simpler approach that absolutely changed everything for us. He's the author of a couple of different books too, and one of the books which I read was about death, which is give me the official title, "Overcoming the Fear of Death." Um, this is a fantastic book, and I read it after my mother passed away because if you don't know, I was like right there when it happened, and when you see that sort of thing firsthand. So yes, I have read this book, and yes, I've thoroughly enjoyed my time with Kelvin altogether, and I think you're going to have a blast with this. Probably one of the only times that I think with his educational past, I'll say an Ivy Leaguer is taken up on this stage. That's what I call him anyway. But listen, I consider this person to be the spiritual lead of our household with my wife and I. If you ever meet my wife at the holiday party or whatnot, she'll rant and rave about what he's been able to do in our relationship and whatnot. So please welcome, very first time, Kelvin Chin.
Appreciate it, Adam. Yeah, so yeah, Adam and Deanna and I go back a few years, and really blessed to have met them and helped them. And as he mentioned, I have a few books. By the way, this will be the only time I'm putting the screen up. So if you want all my social media stuff, do a quick like screenshot of this, and then you'll have all the links down here to Facebook, Instagram. I rarely use Twitter or anything, what they call X now, whatever. LinkedIn, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. There's 200 free videos on my YouTube channel. So that's probably the primary thing to connect with. And then you got my site, you got my website and my cell phone number, which I do not give out. But there you guys go. You guys got it. Please don't give it. Don't publicize it on your social media. No, seriously. It's my only phone number, so you can text me and so forth. And that's the fastest, easiest way to reach me. Basically, is to text me. And love to keep connected with you guys. You got questions of anything? You'll see it on the last screen, but I'll tell you right now. I do a free initial phone consultation about anything that I do with anybody in the world. Okay. So anything that you hear, or you hear I'm starting to talk about something that, oh, you didn't, I wonder what the next thing on that list of things that he could have talked about that he didn't have time to talk about, you can call me and we can set up a time and you can ask me. Okay. I have clients in 70 countries around the world. So, so real quick, before we get into the meditation discussion, and by the way, I'm going to teach you something at the end, a technique to walk away with that you can do whenever you want. And it'll take me a couple of minutes to teach you. It's very simple. I'll tell you a Kate Beckinsale story about that. I was telling Kenny beforehand, he was going to, I was teasing him. I was going to tell him a Kate Beckinsale story. So it relates to that. And you don't know who Kate Beckinsale is. She's an actress. She's she's one of my clients. These are my 3 books. So we're going to just do a quick overview of those. So Adam kind of introduced one of them. This is Overcoming the Fear of Death. And you got through each of the 4 main belief systems. I'm going to come back to that and talk about that as a segue, actually, to talking more about the meditation. So even though it's the first book I wrote, what was it, 10 or 11 years ago I wrote this book, but it's the last book we're going to talk about today, and then we're going to jump from there to talk about the meditation, and you'll see why. Marcus Aurelius updated. So, well, first of all, let me just ask you guys, how many of you already meditate? Anybody? Yeah, a bunch of people. Okay. How many people would love to meditate and have tried to meditate and have failed in meditation? Lots of people. Always get lots of hands with that. We're going to talk about why, okay, that probably is. And as Adam alluded to, what I teach is much, much, much easier, and you'll see why. Just curious, out of the people just raise their hands, regardless of which category you were in, how many people would meditate or be interested in meditation more for stress reduction purposes? Yeah? And how many for what we'll call generally expansion of the mind, self-development, overall holistic development purposes kind of a thing? And you can have both. You can do both. Yeah, right. Okay. Good, gives me a good sense of who you guys are and what your needs are. With this is you guys are all sales-oriented people. I've been in sales, so I know what consultative sales, needs-based, interest-based selling is, right? That's why I'm asking you. Okay. How about, let's talk about Marcus Aurelius a little bit. So this is my second book, Marcus Aurelius Updated. And the full title is 21st Century Meditations on Living Life. It's a collection of 67 essays I've written on living life, how to live life more happily with less suffering and so forth. And I'm going to do a quick couple of screenshots for you of the table of contents to give you the sense of the breadth of the 67 essays. We're not going to go through all of them, but you'll get a feel. But just curious, how many of you know who Marcus Aurelius was? Anybody know who Marcus Aurelius was? So I'll just tell you real quick. This is not going to be a history class, but Marcus Aurelius was the second century Roman emperor, but primarily he viewed himself as a philosopher. Okay, and he didn't want to be an emperor, but it was part of the lineage and all that. Anybody have any clue about what I'm doing wrong? Yeah, it makes this go on and off. I'm trying to keep my mouth close enough to it. I think that's part of it, but I'm not sure. It's not me. No, okay. Thank you. All right. So that's who that name is, okay? Anybody read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius? Anybody read that? Nobody? Anybody have heard of it? Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, have heard of it? Okay. So what that is, let me just tell you, I guess I will give you a little bit of quick history on this. So, because a lot of people don't know, he did not write that as a book. It became a book. Depends which historian you talk to. It became a book called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius anywhere from 600 years after he died to 1200 to 15 to 1600 years after he died, depending on which historian you talk about, and depending on how they're defining the word book. Okay? So what it actually was, and the historians all know this is not secret information, but it's not real publicly known, that he just sat in his tent in between battles in Germania and different, outlying, territories of the Roman Empire, in between battles, and wrote down every day from about 161 AD to about 160 AD to about 181 AD when he died. So about 5 to 8 years in there, ballpark. They're not exactly sure because he didn't date stuff, but he wrote down his reflections every morning. So basically, that's why they call them meditations, because they're very contemplative. He's thinking, he's reflecting on his day, on his life, and his view about his family, and his view of his children, view of this, and view of all of that. He's reflecting, okay? So it's like a journal, right? From the 2nd century. They found these around 800 AD. Somebody found them, and written on parchment or whatever they were written on. And then, the Gutenberg printing press was invented in around 1450-ish, 1454, something like that. And so now they can print, right? But it wasn't called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius on the title of this book until the 1700s. So that's the history behind it. But everybody now knows. I don't know. Should we? Yeah? We're trying. So let's see if this one works consistently. So that's the little history behind it. So why do I call this my collection of essays, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius? Because one of the main reasons is because if you read this, you'll see a lot of my ideas in here kind of match stuff that he talked about, and they're it's like an evolution of the ideas, different ideas. So if we look at quickly look at, so again, that's the obvious book. So you look at, and again, I stood in the back already to try to check the visual. It's a little bit tough for you guys in the back to see, but some of you guys up here in the front can see this. So you see this, chapter 1 is, I picked about a dozen of my favorite Marcus Aurelius maxims out of the original 2nd century book, and then I made some comments. So it's got Kelvin's commentaries there. Chapter 2 is on emotions. Chapter 3 is on life principles. That's how I organized these 67 essays into. Okay. Success, winning, and happiness. I'm just going to read you a few titles just to give you a kind of sense for the topics, right? Uncertainty, unconditional love, crying is not weakness, friendship, the nuances of forgiveness. In that one, I refer to that essay so many times. I know it starts on page 54. I don't have to look at it because forgiveness is a really confusing concept to a lot of people, especially if somebody's hurt you, and especially if somebody's hurt you really badly, right? And I talk about how to forgive somebody, not in the usual way that most people think about forgiveness. Okay, that's all I'm going to tell you, because this is not a lecture on forgiveness, but you check out that essay. Grieving, balance, ego, transcending cruelty. I talk a lot about this in other lectures. If you go on my YouTube channel, you'll see several 2-hour talks each on just transcending cruelty and bullying, all right? And why it happens, how to get beyond it. And if you guys got kids or grandchildren or nieces or nephews, it's useful because you'll pick up tips and you can share and so forth, and you'll translate it for them and so forth, kind of thing. But you'll see the ideas there. Spiritual materialism, sex and spirituality, self-interest versus self-centered. They're not the same thing. People get those confused all the time. They think if I'm being self-interested, I'm being selfish. No, everybody's self-interested. And if you're not self-interested, you're not taking care of yourself, okay? But it's not the same as being selfish, right? And then there's a chapter on meditation you see there, and chapter 5 is the spiritual chapter, and there's a whole bunch of essays in the spiritual chapter, the meaning of life, virtue, spiritual insecurity, is everything meant to be? What's the difference between free will and determinism? Online dating with angels. That's a good title, right? I'm not going to even tell you what that one's about. Karma unbundled and so forth, ego and God and so forth. So since I mentioned the God word, you got to understand everything I do is from a non-religious standpoint. I'm not telling people to believe in God or not believe in God. I work with a lot of agnostics and atheists, and I'm not telling you where I fall in that spectrum, because most people would guess I'm an X and I'm really a Y on that one. So this is my 3rd book. Again, just quick overview. After the Afterlife is the title, and they're memories of my past lives. What? Exactly what I thought. When I first started opening up for me, I did not believe in, first, you gotta understand, I grew up in Norwood, Massachusetts. That's a 20,000 person little town, suburb of Boston, if anybody knows that area. Um, Very Catholic town. I grew up Protestant, went to the First Congregational Church, didn't really pay attention in Sunday school. Okay, I was like a bad Sunday school student. And I just thought it was a bunch of stories, nice stories, but stories. And I didn't believe in heaven, never mind reincarnation. Reincarnation. I used to walk by people at meditation conferences when I was in my teens and 20s, and I overhear people talking about reincarnation. I go, yeah, these crazy people. Let's go sit over here. I don't want to eat with them, until I started having these really unusual experiences, which I get into in great detail in this book. So I walk through and I tell you exactly what I was feeling, thinking, seeing, everything at that moment when this stuff started happening to me. And at first, I thought it was crazy. I thought I was making this stuff up. Okay. Imagination, really vivid imagination, until I started speaking in other languages and stuff like like Sumerian, which is a 6,000-year-old culture, which I'd never studied before. Does anybody know what Saracens are, for example? Anybody? Yeah. So Saracens is what? That may be a different word that sounds like Saracens, but and you may not be wrong. I don't know. You may know more about this than I do. No, I started. This word Saracens came into my consciousness, and I was literally. You'll see a picture of my daughter in a little bit. I was meditating with my daughter. I taught my kids when they were 4 years old to meditate, and we were meditating, and she was in high school, and I blurted out Saracens, and I didn't know what the word meant. And so, fortunately, we got these things called computers. You ever heard of them? And then you can look stuff up on the internet. And I looked stuff up. I looked Saracens up, and I said, "Well, what was that?" And turns out Saracens is the word for Muslims before, I think, around 1600 A.D. The word Muslims became, in usage. Before that, you called them Saracens. Well, guess who had a memory of being in a crusade on horseback fighting Saracens in the 1100s? So where did that come from? So I started having very strange experiences like that were inexplicable. It just did not logically make sense in terms of Kelvin Chin's 20th and 21st century lifetime. Okay. And so I get into that in detail in that book. But this is, what happens after we die? Do we become human again in a different body, in a different culture? Obviously, you probably figured out the short answer to those questions is yes. That's my experience anyway. I've been I've been Black, Caucasian, Asian, what am I leaving out? Native American. I don't remember being Hispanic. Uh, no shade on anybody who's Hispanic, but I just don't. Maybe I have been, and I just don't remember. But I have memories of being all those different in all over the world, almost all the continents. So my memories resurfaced at about 45 years ago, and I have 20 memories from 20 to 5 different lifetimes. And they go back about 6,000 years. That's Sumeria, right? 4,000 BC. But my whole thing, you'll find in everything I do, whether it's meditation, whether it's this, whether it's the Marcus Aurelius ideas about my ideas in the Marcus Aurelius book, about love, about friendship, about forgiveness, is how can we teach ourselves to be better, basically. That's my lens that I look through myself. Even when I was practicing law and I worked for law firms, I used to work for Womble Carlyle here, which I don't even know the name of the firm now, but it's merged like 3-4 times since I was there. But I was here in like 2009, 2011, 2012. I lived here in Raleigh, and the firm had or has maybe still an office in RTP, et cetera, Winston-Salem, Greensboro, and so forth, and up and down the East Coast, and now it's global. But even then in that job, I would always look through the lens of what can I learn from this, and how can I teach others in that case, my lawyers who I was working with, to improve the quality of their life too. And in this book, what continues of our personalities and what can it teach us about our universe? So the last half of this book is about our personalities, and I get into detail. And I did a list recently, and I think I came up with somewhere around 30 to 40 different personality traits of myself that I've noticed that have continued from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. And I think that's what happens with all of us. And not that you remember them all, but I think that that's what happens. We have old personality traits, and sometimes you may think like, why do I really love that? Or why do I hate that? You know, it's based on something who knows how long from when ago that somehow left a deep impression. And you're still carrying it around 21st century, 500, 1,000, or 5,000, I don't know, years later. Who knows, right? But to me, the importance is not so much figuring that out. The importance is how can it help us today? That's always my focus. And here, speaking of today, that's my two children today. Okay, so talk about soul families. That's my son Jesse. He's an actor. By the way, a little plug for what he's going to be in. What's it called? The Paper. The guy. I don't know if it's coming out in Peacock tomorrow. I don't know if anybody have heard about that. He's going to be episode 8. I'll just tell you what it is, but I won't tell you all of what it is. But he's in this. It's a comedy, and it's based on the guys who created The Office, you know, and now so it's called The Paper, and it's kind of obviously going to be very dysfunctional in a funny way. And my son plays Jesse. You'll see him. I can't remember if they had him shave or not. I can't remember because sometimes he's saying, hey, can you shave? He had an Absolute vodka ad that he shaved. He was 28 years old. This was about 6 years ago or something, and he got the role for the Absolute vodka ad, and he shaved. He goes, you got to shave before you come for wardrobe and blah blah blah. And he goes to wardrobe, and they're fitting him in like a $2,000 suit for this Absolute vodka ad, and then the casting person came in, or the director came in or something, and saw him shaved. He said, he can't be in the ad, because you look underage. He's 28. He looked like under drinking age, right? Anyway, so but he's in the paper that's I guess debuting tomorrow on Peacock. And again, we can't reveal because NDAs and everything, but he's in a really funny scene. What can I tell you that will flag it for you? He plays a scientist. I guess I can tell you that. Okay. That's all you need to know. He plays a scientist, and Domhnall Gleeson, is that his last name? He's the star of it and so forth, is there in the scene and so forth and so on. So you never know. Those of you, I talking to some of the people here are actors. You don't know. You're gonna end up on the cutting room floor. You don't know till the show shows up. The film shows up. Did you make it? But Jesse thinks he's gonna be in it because it's such a hysterical scene, and the star is in it, and also one of the, I can't remember if he's a co-producer, or I think he's a co-producer who also, or maybe he's a co-writer or something, plays Jesse's assistant in it. So he thinks that because of those reasons that it's probably not going to get cut. That's my daughter, Sam. She's, I'll tell you a little bit about Sam. So again, I taught both of my kids when they were 4 years old to meditate, right? So she's been meditating for 26 years now. And she's teaching meditation with me through my nonprofit. So she's a meditation teacher. She's also a model with Wilhelmina Modeling, out of globally headquartered out of New York. And I tell you the name of her modeling agency, and I'm not going to tell you why, but pay attention to remember that name, Wilhelmina Modeling. It's WILHELMINA, modeling agency, when you read this book. That's all I'm going to tell you. So that's the breadcrumb teaser. Okay. Yeah. Is it specific to what we're talking about right now? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. No. So if you get the audiobook or the ebook or the paperback version, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be in any special state of mind. You're going to be conscious, obviously. I guess that's a state of mind. Is that a state of mind? I think that you're going to be conscious. But I tell my students, I am the one teacher, which is a quick aside, I am the one teacher you will have in your life who goes, yes, they fell asleep during my class. That's awesome. Because it shows me that you're really relaxed and you chilled out and you needed to sleep, right? But no, you don't have to be in a special state of mind or whatever to read. Now, it might put you into a different state, like I said. Yeah, who knows? No, well, 6,000 years. No, you'll see on the rear cover of the book, there's somebody mentions that helped her open up her memories. So it just, it can, who knows how it would affect you, By the way, I don't know if we mentioned, but people need to put their name. Where is that? Here. So I have 16 books to give away. We're going to do a drawing at the end here. So if you want to get one of the books for free, then you got to put your name in that little plastic thing there. We're going to draw it at the end. Okay. Okay. So we're going to segue from this book into meditation, and we're going to dive into the meditation that I teach a little bit. Okay. But we're going to just overcoming the fear of death, as Adam said, this is the one that he's read. I think he heard the audiobook version of this. I narrate the audiobook version of this. So if you like my voice, great. If you don't, maybe you get the paperback. But I haven't gotten around yet to do to narrate the audiobook of the second and third book. But there's a AI voice or something that I selected on Amazon so there's audiobook version and I hear it's decent. So anyway, but let's talk about this one. So the subtitle of this, Overcoming the Fear of Death, is Through the Four Main Belief Systems. So let's talk about that, because I already told you that I don't take a religious approach to anything that I do. Okay, I take a non-cultural, non-religious approach. And so these are the four beliefs. Okay? And we're going to jump from one of these beliefs right into meditation, and you'll see why in a sec. But I came up with these four beliefs because my mom died when I was young and when she was very young. She was 50 years old. She died suddenly, cancer, really like bad, metastasized, thousands of tumors in her body before any symptoms, etc. So she was gone very quickly. It really blew me away, that emotionally. That's why I got into helping people with death and dying. I was in my third year of law school. I was becoming a lawyer. I was not into doing this kind of grieving and death work and so forth and so on. That's not where I was headed. Okay. But I back-ended into helping people nights and weekends for free. Okay. That's how I got into this. So she's the inspiration for this book, is the bottom line, and for the Overcoming the Fear of Death Foundation that I started. Okay. But when I talked to people back then, this was 40 years ago. Okay. When I talk to people, I sometimes people will get into arguments about like who's right and who's wrong about what happens after you die. People have different beliefs, culturally, religious, and so forth. And I thought we should, bless you, we should be talking about this more openly. This is this is like the sick kid in the closet kind of a thing. Death. Oh, we can't talk about that. Oh, you want to talk about that? Go upstairs, whatever. No, we need to talk more openly about it. It's part of living life, I tell my clients, right? It is, okay, it's the end of living biological life, but it is part of life, okay? We can't just make believe it doesn't happen. It does happen. And then people shelve it and so forth. And then when they're hit with it, whether it's their own death or somebody else, a loved one's death, then we're not equipped at all how to handle it, right? So I came up with these 4 beliefs. No afterlife. That's the science belief. That's belief number 1, belief system number 1, I call it. That was my dad's belief. Scientist, that's it. Put me in a, my dad would say this all the time. Put me in the box, throw the dirt on me, I'm done. That's the quote. That's the Henry Chin quote. Okay, my dad, right? And then the second belief system, fear of continued existence. So people believe that you're going to continue, but there's some fear, and their fear could be from a lot of different stuff. Fear of punishment. It could be fear of not knowing what's going to happen. Could be you may think, well, if you believe in reincarnation, why would you have a fear? Well, Buddhists, some of them have fear. They come to me, they have fears. They're worried they're going to be a mosquito in their next lifetime. It's like, so you can have all kinds of fears about all kinds of stuff, even if it doesn't make sense. You can have a fear, right? Fear of continued existence. Third belief system, belief in an afterlife, but no fear. Might even be looking forward to it, okay? And when I'm using afterlife because it's a less religious term, you could use the word heaven, and in some cultures they call it Valhalla, they call it, nirvana, whatever, whatever. Reincarnation is the 4th belief system. We've already talked about that, past lives. Maybe if you want, you don't have to, but if you want to come back in a different body in a future life, okay? And so basically, how to overcome the fear of death, 2-pronged approach. I've simplified it to two prongs. One is to increase our understanding, and the other is to turn on the opposite of the fight or flight response. Anybody not heard of the fight or flight response? Does not know what fight or flight is? That and the fight or flight gets a bad rap. It's a survival mechanism that every animal, not just humans, every animal is born with the fight or flight response. And if survival, it's built for survival. It's not built when you're on the freeway here trying to get into RTP and the traffic's backed up for 5 miles. What the heck is going on? They got 2 lanes closed. No, that's not survival, but our fight or flight turns on, right? Inappropriately all the time now on 21st century Earth. Well, what does that do? It creates a lot of anxiety, a lot of imbalance in our blood chemistry and our brain chemistry, et cetera, okay? So sometimes it's fear of death. We're going to talk about other fears and anxiety and so forth. This is just segueing from this book to our more general discussion. But if you're talking about fear of death specifically, yes, understanding is important. So the book gives you a little bit more understanding about death and dying and so forth, different views, different belief systems around it. And even if you don't have a fear of death at all yourself, the book is useful. Like I've done seminars for medical professionals, for example, where they're dealing with people from all different cultures and religions. And even though they may be able to talk to somebody who shares the same beliefs they do, how do they talk to somebody who doesn't? And the book helps them with that, okay? But turning on the opposite of the fight or flight, that's where the meditation comes in, right? And so nobody's laughing. Okay. That guy with hair, this guy, that's me. Anyway, so that's a few years ago. I studied with the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Anybody recognize his name? Does anybody recognize his name? No, you heard of him before? No. I was going to ask you, so you just phrased my next question, which was, anybody heard of the Beatles? Which is, yeah, he taught the Beatles to meditate, right? Okay. So I studied personally with him. I was an international leader in his organization for about 10 years. I traveled around the world, taught meditation. I taught the first meditation courses in the history of West Point Military Academy, Army cadets, New York, including all the officers, all the professors are Army officers, and so forth. And then the commandant learned, back then we called her his secretary, but now his assistant, whatever. I talked to librarian, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody. Taught about 200-300 people at West Point. I taught the first meditation courses in the history of U.S. Army. I was in Korea on all the U.S. Army bases, including up on the DMZ, the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. I was telling Adam last night at dinner, it's the most stressed environment I've ever been in my life on planet Earth, the DMZ. When I was there, you can Google this, and I actually Googled it to look up more details to put on my website. I got there 2 weeks after they found the first tunnel that the North Koreans had dug into the demilitarized zone. If you don't know, it's a no man's land that they established after the Korean War in 1953 or 52, whatever. And shoot to kill. You're in there. You know it's not supposed to be any human beings, and it's I think 1.8 to 3 miles wide, and it goes the width of the Korean Peninsula, separating North and South Korea. And there's about 50 or 60 or 70,000 U.S. troops and UN troops and Korean troops on the south, and you get 50 to 60, 70,000 lining Chinese and North Korean troops lining the border of the other side. Well, 2 weeks before I got there, they found a tunnel that the North Koreans and the Chinese had dug under. We couldn't talk about it, right? People would freak out. 8,000 troops an hour through that tunnel. Okay, it was not completed, obviously. It was going to end up right outside Seoul, South Korea, the capital of South Korea. And then about 4 months later, they found another tunnel, 30,000 troops an hour. It was as big as this room. It could fit huge tanks, everything could go through there, 30,000 troops an hour. Okay, so World War III was about to happen when I was there. It was crazy. Okay, we couldn't talk about it. So I was teaching meditation there for obvious reasons, right? People a little bit stressed out, you think? Anyway, so, all right. So that's a little bit about my background. And I've been teaching, even when I was a lawyer, I would teach some lawyers on the side, because they would always ask me, like, how did you not freak out in that meeting? Anyway, so, you know, and they said, can you teach me? I said, well, actually, I can. So here's some quick overview. So you have probably already heard, read about these benefits, you know, reducing stress and anxiety, better sleep, balancing emotions, better mental clarity, and enhancing self-knowledge. Enhancing self-knowledge is just shorthand for what those of you who raised your hand saying you want to be more, improve your self-development, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So the fight or flight, we talked about this already. Okay, we don't have to go over that. You know what fight or flight is. Your cortisol, your heart rate skyrockets, and the blood goes to your big muscles and your legs and your shoulders because you're going to fight the saber-toothed tiger or you're going to run away. Okay, that's it, right? Houston Astrodome analogy. Okay, so I came up with this analogy many years ago. One of my students studied at the University of Houston. He got a PhD in psychology. And the professor came in one day and he said, all of you students here, you incorrectly think your mind is like this little 8-inch bucket sitting down in the middle of the field, playing field, and you think that's your mind because the lights are off in this 70, 80, 90,000 seat stadium, and all you see is this little desk lamp over this little 8-inch bucket. You think that's your mind. That's it. And there are 10 to 15 ping pong balls bouncing in and out. Those are your thoughts and emotions in the analogy. Okay. And he said, no, your mind is huge. It's this huge football stadium. So what I teach my students to do is how to turn the light switches on in the rest of the football stadium, right? Because you don't want to focus because that's going to keep you in the bucket. So I teach a technique that's not focusing. We're going to talk about that in a sec. Okay, right? Fight or flight keeps you stuck in the bucket, right? Trapped, limited. Common mistakes in meditation, in the technique. So how many people have tried meditation that's involved this? Focus, control, yeah, clearing the mind, quieting your mind, right? Thoughts are bad, this belief that thoughts are bad. No, it's wrong, okay? trying to relax. What happens when you try to relax? You don't relax, you know? It doesn't make you relax. You may feel a little bit relaxed sometimes with some guided meditation techniques. So they're not zero useful, they're somewhat useful. But compared to what? So compared to really letting go is what is the way I teach it. But why are they so common? They use what I call waking state rules. And waking state rules to create a non-waking state is illogical, right? Because meditation, we know from the medical studies, I didn't tell you, I was at one of the first tests, I was a test subject in the first medical study done in the United States on any form of meditation, early 1970s. So I was a teenager, and they measured us, they wired us, they took blood samples, et cetera, et cetera. And so they measured cortisol levels and everything else, 40 to 60 hormones and chemicals and stuff. And they determined, the doctors determined that the state was neurophysiologically not the same as waking or dreaming or sleeping. So, and yet most other techniques use those waking state rules, right? Focus, pay attention, look through the windshield. Those are useful waking state rules so you don't get in a car accident, but it's not useful in meditation. And it's certainly not useful, for example, analogously, to go to sleep at night. Imagine if you were teaching an alien to go to sleep and you just said, focus, control, pay attention to your relaxed legs and your da-da-da-da, and the alien would go, what the heck? You know, it'd stay awake all night, right? You know, have anybody heard of the term parasympathetic nervous system? You know that? So that's the opposite of the sympathetic. The sympathetic is fight or flight. Parasympathetic is the opposite of fight or flight. So it's just the medical term. But it's an automatic switch. It doesn't make sense to turn on an automatic switch by controlling, right? You can't control to turn on an automatic switch. So that's why meditation needs to be effortless and easy. No control, no focusing, right? And so that's the way I teach it. Turns on the opposite of the fight or flight, turns on the parasympathetic, which is the healing mode of the nervous system. Your anxiety goes away, the stress reduces, etc. Even if you have stressful, pressured circumstances like you do here at work, it rolls off of you. That's the difference. It's not, you're not a robot. You're still needing to meet your quota, but you deal with it. It rolls off. You can forget about it. You can go to your family and leave it behind. Okay? That's the huge difference. Okay? So, and expanding the conscious capacity of the mind, again, allows the mind to develop self-knowledge in that way, right? Okay? So, Kate Beckinsale, who you guys have probably heard of her. She's an actress. And I'm going to tell you another story about her in a second when I teach you something. So this is just several, success stories from clients of mine around the world. A physician lowered his blood pressure, normalized in 6 weeks. Again, who knows? Everybody's an individual, but that happened in 6 weeks for him. Leah, who's in the country of Serbia, Adeni, who's in the country of Nigeria, and so forth. She had anxiety attacks. He didn't have any anxiety at all, Adeni in Nigeria, but he's found just increasing calm and so forth. And Megan came to me for more spiritual reasons. One of her daughters tragically died, and obviously very stressed from that, and then wondering about her daughter, where her daughter was, and so forth and so on. So this is how the classes are structured. These are the last couple of slides here. So 4-day class, first 3 days are consecutive, et cetera, et cetera. Lifetime follow-up. I give lifetime follow-up to all of my students. So that's how you can find me on the website, et cetera. I have another class starting Friday, September 19th, and another Friday, October 17th. If there was a interested group here who wanted to just kind of learn together, I could organize that on an alternate weekend besides, those are my public group classes that are being scheduled right now. But again, you can find that on my website um, uh, for those. If there was a group here of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people wanted to learn, I could schedule your schedule around your schedule. So I'm going to teach you this, okay? So I'm going to leave you guys with this. This is not a meditation technique, but it's a very simple calming technique, and I'm going to do it with me now, and I'll tell you why it works while you guys are doing it. You just put one hand on your belly button. Doesn't matter which hand, and you're just resting your hand on your belly button. You're not pushing or anything. It's just sitting on your belly button. And you just take some slow, deep breaths. That's it. Just take some slow, deep breaths. You're not hyperventilating. You're not counting your breaths. And you can do it standing, sitting, lying down, eyes open, eyes closed, doesn't matter. You do it in public place, private place. I have lawyers doing it, freaking out in partnership meetings in high rises, and nobody knows what they're doing. Okay? I taught my son to do it before he went to kindergarten, first day of school. You know, nobody pays attention. It's very simple, okay? Why does it work? Because if you're feeling stressed out, where are you? You're all up in your head, right? What's the worst thing to do? You ever tried to get yourself out of your head? What happens? It gets you more in your head, right? You say, oh, I got to stop thinking about that. You can try to stop thinking about something. What happens? You think about it 10 times more, right? So it's just, you can't try not to try. It doesn't work. So when you put your hand in your tummy, where does your attention automatically go? It goes to your tummy because you just put your hand on your belly button. So you've disengaged your mind without trying to disengage your mind from whatever it's thinking. And when you take some slow, deep breaths, what does that do? It engages, it stimulates what's called the vagus nerve. You can Google it later, VAGUS. The vagus nerve, not Las Vegas. Somebody was talking about that with me. I think it was Adam, and we were talking about it last night. But VAGUS, okay, the vagus nerve. It's the longest nerve in the human, in the animal body, in the human body. It goes from the base of your brain stem, goes to all of your organs, your lung, your stomach, your heart, your kidney, your whatever I'm leaving out, everything, your small intestine, your large intestine. And when you stimulate the vagus nerve, it just calms. It turns on the parasympathetic quickly, okay? But it's temporary. It doesn't have the long-term lasting effects that the meditation does. But that's a simple thing you can do anywhere, okay? And also the quick story about Kate. So Kate calls me on my cell phone. Kate Beckinsale calls me. She says, Kelvin, I'm freaking out. I'm in London. I got to give the GQ Man of the Year Award. So Google her name and look up GQ Man of the Year Award and look at the dress that she's wearing. So it's like this bizarre, I won't even describe it to you. Just look it up. And then I think it was 2018 or 2019 or something like that. GQ Man of the Year. She says, I'm freaking out. They're dressing me now. She's in her hotel suite. It's like, and I said, okay, can you meditate with me now? She says, no, I can't. They got to dress me and I got to get in the limo and then they got to drive me to wherever, some Royal Albert Hall or wherever. She said, I'm going to be in front of thousands of people and millions of people on TV and I'm going to I'm going to fall on my face walking across stage with this crazy dress on. Everything. That's a gate. Calm down. Just put your hand in your tummy. And I taught her this. I says, put your hand in your tummy. You can do this whenever, do it in the limo, do it on the way, when you're standing on the side, before you go on, walk up to the microphone, just stand outside people's view and just put your hand in your tummy and do this. And she's texted me after, she said, it worked. I felt calm. I didn't fall on my face. So there you go. All right. So that's the meditation class. Again, 4 days. Get in touch with me if you're interested. And those are the 2 classes that I still have seats in that are coming up. And like I said, if there's enough of you, I could do a special class for you guys if you want on a different weekend, or you could join one of those public classes. My classes are small, 5 or 6 people, because the Q&A on days 2, 3, and 4, I want to make sure everybody's questions are covered. And I don't want the class going longer than 2 hours. I can teach more than those, more than that, and I have in the past. But it gets diluted, and I want you guys to have get as much knowledge and understanding and question answered as possible. So that's me, and that's my daughter Samantha, obviously, um, and feel free to get in touch. Questions. Yes. I've got to remember, somebody remind me to do the drawing before we leave. Yes. Yeah. Do you want to? Maybe you should speak into this because we're recording.
Okay, so I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder. It's something I've dealt with all my life. And in most treatment plans for OCD, they teach the importance of usually OCD is fear-based. If I don't perform this ritual, if I don't do this little cycle, then something horrible will happen, whether it's rational or irrational, right? It all comes down to the same thing. Most people teach exposure to the fear, acceptance of the fear, move on with your life, right? A lot of people find meditation to be helpful with that. And I guess my question is, when you are meditating, dealing with fear, whether that be rational or irrational, something you have control over versus something you don't, does I guess the method vary, or do you treat fear pretty much all the same regardless of the source?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the bottom line is the latter. We treat fear the same way because this is a non-content, different from what you kind of outlined, the general approaches. As I may have alluded to earlier at the beginning, I can't remember if did I say this. It's worth saying again, if I did, that it's a non-content oriented approach. We're looking at expanding the container. We're not dealing with changing the color of the ping pong balls. That's typically the approach that most people use out there with OCD, similar issues, is to change your thing, change the color of the ping pong ball. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, yeah. Maybe the battery's getting low on this. I don't know. Anyway, so that's the thing, right? And so um, it's about what I'm teaching expands the conscious capacity. What does that automatically do? If you visualize that Houston Astrodome analogy, the 8-inch bucket idea, it's giving the ping pong balls more room. All of a sudden, there's more freedom. And that's an emotional effect that it has on the meditator. Well, if you have more freedom from what you're talking about, you're going to feel better. And so, yes, does that thought, emotion, feeling, sensation, whatever, eventually reduce and go away? Yes. But immediately, you're going to feel freedom from it. And that's the huge first step, right? And then it just cumulative keeps growing. Yeah. Did you have a question?
If we wanted to start that group, if we wanted to start that group, would we just text you? Okay.
Yeah. You could just text me or shoot it to Bailey, whatever. You know, is that okay? Yeah.
This is really fascinating. I have a friend, my little sister, not really, but my little sister who has a learning disability. She's 36, but probably mentally more 12 or 13, and she suffers from tremendous anxiety. And part of my role as her big sister is to try to help her cope with that. And I'm just wondering, with these kinds of programs, is it something that can be learned by someone who does have this kind of cognitive impairment? Because I know you mentioned you taught your 4-year-old, so I was wondering, this would be an interesting thing for me to maybe look into for her.
Yeah, the short answer is yes. I've taught people who have all kinds of mental impairment. Obviously, I tailor the class, right? I tailor the instruction depending on what their cognitive ability is, right? Not just with children, I'm talking adults and any age, it doesn't matter. But yes, yeah. I've taught people who are in mental, I don't know, do we call them institutions still? I don't know what the word is, but you know what I mean. Yeah, yeah. In residence. Yeah, right. As well as anybody else. Yeah. Other questions? Anything? Yeah.
So I'm real big and heavy into dreaming. I'm a heavy dreamer. Um, I have a lot of vivid dreams, somewhat almost close to like I can control my dreams and recognize when I'm dreaming and things of that nature. Like, is there something behind that? Because my daughter has that same trait. My 13-year-old. No one else in my household dreams. Weirdly to say, but me and her, we have our little daddy daughter moments when we talking about the dreams that we had and what may have led to it and things like that. But is there something deeper to that I can find out or dive into with your books and things like that?
So what you're when you have really clear dreams, and when you could number one, have clear dreams, another degree of that is remember your dreams when you wake up, because a lot of times people remember, I know I dream, but I can't remember when I wake up. It's like the slate gets cleaned or whatever. um, and then another degree is controlling yourself in the dream and changing things in the dream. That's another degree. So yeah, um, what the meditation would do is enhance that. It would increase your ability wherever you are in the spectrum, because it's a spectrum. It's not black and white. It's a spectrum. And even the people, like you say, in the family who say they don't dream, they're dreaming. They are experiencing rapid eye movement, REM sleep state, which is what we call dreaming medically, because we know that every animal has to have dreaming. Otherwise, depending on how long they're prevented from it dreaming, you start losing memory first, and and then you start developing symptoms of psychosis and so forth and so on. You can have a mental break if you really prevent people. So and they did this in the late 1940s, early 1950s with U.S. Army soldiers. Yeah, they kept them awake. They kept waking them up, and they were doing it to see if it was going to be a good um, spy kind of, if we get these capture these Russian spies, we capture them, can we get information from them? And they found no, it would be terrible. Can we get terrible information from them? Because it was not a good thing. But that's how we know about it. Back then they were treating the soldiers like meat. Let's just call it what it is. Yeah, yeah. But no, so in terms of your question, in terms of the books, so in my purple book, my Marcus Aurelius updated book, um, I do get into some things about dreaming in some of the essays. The 67 essays, it covers a huge range, right? And then, but the technique of meditation is what would open up more vistas. And that's what I've noticed personally. I've been meditating for 50 years now, So yeah. Do you have no? Any other questions? Anything? Yes.
How you work with clients. Oh, do you take any insurance, or how do you work that out with your clients?
Yeah. So how does it work when people work with us, our clients? No, I don't take insurance, although it depends. I have submitted invoice. I mean, I've created invoices for people who need to get CEUs and so forth, depending on what their profession is, et cetera, and they've submitted it and gotten reimbursed. So I don't know. That's out of my area of expertise. But the thing is, we never turn anybody away for financial reasons. Zero. And people who can pay, and people who can't, and you can also pay over time. And so the fee, just so you know, just be explicit since you're talking about this. So fee for working adults is $495 if it's a group class. I teach private all the way through for some people, like Kate, who doesn't want, she want to be in a group of people. Can I get an autograph? And other people who don't want to wait till I have an opening, or they can't. Doctors, their schedule is whacked, so they're on call. So I'll teach them privately. So I charge $895 for that. But $495 for my group classes, $395 for our students. And for children under 10, $100. It's a slightly different technique for children under 10. It's not the sitting eyes closed technique. And at least one of the parents has to have learned what I teach first, because I want the parents to understand what the children are getting into, you know, and how it's going to open the kids up. Okay, good. Anything else? Great to see you guys. Thanks for coming. Yeah. Got to do this.